Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be showing a couple of recipes that I consider just good old country cooking. One, I'm going to be showing you how I use dried beans to make a big pot of navy beans soup and a cake of cornbread. And then the other is going to be country style steak and gravy with mashed potatoes and green beans. Both of these meals are made in my Instant Pot. Just good comfort cooking. So first I'm going to show you how I cook dried beans in the Instant Pot. I've got a pound of navy beans, and I just refer back to the Instant Pot notes that they send in your pot. It'll give you a guide of how long to cook certain vegetables and meats, and they have a dried bean section. So I'm just following that instruction, making sure that I don't go over that half pot fill line. You want to make sure that you keep it below there, so you can see I've got my pound of beans and all of my broth in, and I didn't go over that. I'm going to add in my couple of teaspoons of salt. Also going to add in a tablespoon of olive oil. You need the oil to help keep the foam down in your Instant Pot. And then I added in a couple of bay leaves. You can add in whatever seasonings you like. Onion powder, garlic powder would be good. And of course use whatever kind of dried beans. But by making these dried beans, I didn't have to do what the recipe called for, which was buy canned beans. It's just a way to save some money, and I already had ham stock that I had made homemade that I was able to cook these beans in my Instant Pot. And so then I will make sure my pot lid is on and it's set to sealing, and then I will set it for the right amount of time based on what the recipe or the notes in the box had said, which was 30 minutes for these kind of beans. So once your pot is finished with its cooking time, and then you do your release of pressure, you remove the pot lid, and then they are fully cooked at this point. Here I'm going to show you that I can take a bean and press it with my finger and it's split open. So it's tender, it's perfectly cooked, and this took 30 minutes. I didn't have to soak my beans, I didn't have to boil them for a few hours. It took a half an hour, and I have cooked dried beans. So once the beans are done, I'm just removing those bay leaves out of it, and I'm showing you here how you could use a mason jar. You could just store your beans if you don't need them right away. You can make up a whole big batch ahead of time and store them away until you need them. Instead of having canned beans, you would have your already pre-made beans. You just want to keep these in the fridge. And I would add some of that broth into that as well. I'm, however, going to be using the whole pot of beans, the 1 pound of dried beans that I cooked up that day. I'm going to be using them in the recipe that I'm going to be showing you next, which is navy bean soup. So once I have all the beans out, I have them set here ready to be mashed with my potato masher. I'm going to mash a few of them. I've got my carrots, onions, celery, and my bacon all set to be ready. I'm going to turn my pot on to saute, making sure that it's on the highest heat setting. And while that gets warm, I'll open up my bacon and start getting it into the pot. This recipe will be linked down below in the description box, as well as the other recipes I'm doing in this video. But it calls for 4 strips of bacon. And so I just find the easiest way is to grab my kitchen shears, and I just cut it right over the pot and let it fall in. And that pot is getting hot, and so it will start to cook. And I will be stirring it and letting it cook as I chop up my vegetables. I think when I used to watch Rachel Ray all the time, she would call this the chop and drop method. She would chop her stuff up right beside of her pot she was cooking in, just drop it right in as she cut each individual thing. So I seem to have adopted that method as well. So I just continue to chop all my vegetables and stir my bacon as I'm going. And once it is fully cooked, I'm going to pull it out once it's crisped up enough, and I'm going to throw all those vegetables in. But while I'm waiting on that, I then grab my bowl of beans and I go to smashing. The recipe calls for like 3 cans of beans, and it tells you to mash up like one of those cans. And that just helps kind of thicken the soup because you're not using any cream in it. You're not using any cornstarch or flour thickener. So by mashing up 1 can's worth of beans, you kind of get that thickness that you need. So now I'm just removing all that bacon from the pot. Gonna put it on a paper towel to drain and save it for the end of the soup recipe. And now I will get in all of my vegetables, the carrots, celery, and onions, for them to start cooking in the bacon grease. So here I'm just getting all my beans ready that they're going to go in, the ones that have been mashed and the whole ones. And next I'm going to be adding in my tomato paste. I think the recipe calls for a couple of tablespoons, and I probably do a little bit over that because I use heaping tablespoons. But you just want to get that into the vegetables and kind of let it heat up and cook a little bit so it'll distribute well in the vegetables. Now I'm going to be adding in my chicken broth. I make homemade chicken broth whenever we have chicken bones that are left from cooking whole chickens. I'll stick them in my crock pot and cook them up overnight to make homemade chicken stock. If that's something you would like to see how I do that, leave me a comment here on YouTube and I will make a video of how I make homemade chicken stock. We actually store it in our freezer, and so we always have it on hand. It's low sodium, we know exactly what's in it, and I'm able to give it a lot of good flavor, but know it's homemade. And so we like that, it saves money too. Then once I have all my ingredients put in, I will put my lid on, set the vent to sealing, not to venting, and turn it on manual. Is the way my pot is worked. Some of them I believe will say pressure cook, but for mine it says manual. And I'm setting it for 15 minutes. And then it's on and ready to go. So while I wait for my soup to do its thing, I will then move over and go ahead and start some cornbread. So I'm just using a box of Jiffy. My mom makes the cornbread. She makes it from scratch, homemade, with the flour and the self-rising cornmeal, and it's good. I mean, it's really good. But tonight was my doing dinner, so I took the help and I got the Jiffy. So, but I think it's good and my family likes it. And I have my cast iron skillet. It's in the oven. It's getting hot, and I like to do that, and it's already greased, and it will come out of the oven and be ready to be filled with the batter. So I'm just following the box's instructions, putting it together exactly the way it says to do it on the box, and I will bake it for how long it says to bake it on the box. So when your soup is done with its pressure cook time, you'll see I've changed my lid over to my crock pot lid that came with my Instant Pot, just keeping it warm. So when we were ready to eat and the cornbread was finished, I add back in the bacon and 3 cups of spinach. And so you put that in, it will quickly wilt down as you stir that in. It doesn't take but a few minutes. So as our cornbread sat and got cool enough that we could handle it to cut it, the spinach was able to wilt down. So here we are, we served it up, just big ladlefuls into a bowl, and we top our bowls of soup with our cornbread, and it was delicious. The family loved it, and it wasn't too bad for us. I know it's not keto friendly with the beans, but we love it, and it could easily be made vegetarian as well because you're only using 4 strips of bacon. So if you left that out, it could be a vegetarian meal. Next up, I'm showing you my recipe for cube steak. We make country style steak or cube steak and gravy at our house about once a week. My family loves it, and so I'm using 2 pounds of cube steak. I use 1 packet of onion soup mix, 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, and I use 1 cup of beef broth. Now, I do not have any homemade beef broth, and so I'm using bouillon cube here to make my beef broth. You could use chicken stock instead, or chicken broth if you wanted to. So here I am putting in my pounds of cube steak just into my Instant Pot. These were still frozen in the middle. I can add frozen meat to my Instant Pot and it not be a problem. That's one of the things that sold me on this appliance, and having an extra appliance like this in my house, is because I can go from frozen to fully cooked and tender meat in just hardly no time at all. So I add all the ingredients together. You don't have to add any extra salt or anything because the soup, the broth, the onion soup mix, all that's plenty salty enough on its own. I make sure my vent is set to sealing, and then I set my pot to manual or pressure cook, and then I set it for 27 minutes. Now remember, this is still frozen beef in the middle, like it's still solid pieces, and yet in 27 minutes with about a 10 minutes worth of natural pressure release, or here looks like I went 20 minutes, it will be completely cooked, it will be tender, and it will be easy to pull apart the pieces now, as you will see after I remove the lid. So I take it out of the pot, and then I just use my tongs to pull apart the pieces of meat, and you'll see it is tender, it is falling apart as I pull apart each piece. Every pound that we get our cube steak like this, it has 4 slices. So this is a total of 8 slices of meat. And then once I get it all pulled apart, I will stick it back into the pot after I add my cornstarch slurry. A lot of times Instant Pot recipes you'll find have cornstarch slurries that you're going to utilize to help thicken a gravy, and so that's what I'll be doing here. So now I'm going to take my Instant Pot, turn it, hit the off button, and once it's on off, then I'm going to go over to my Saute button. And once you hit the Saute, I want to make sure it's all the way on the highest setting, and it is. And so now I'm just going to make up my cornstarch slurry so that I can put it into the liquid that the meat cooked in. So I just take a couple of, I don't know, probably tablespoons of cornstarch, and I stick it in a coffee mug usually, add the water to it, stir that up, there won't be any lumps that way, and then you're going to pour it into your liquid. So that broth that the meat cooked in now is getting a little boil going on it, and that's what you want. So when you see that boil going, then you can add in your cornstarch slurry, and that's going to help thicken it. And once it comes to the right thickness that I like, then I'll add the steaks back in. Now you could definitely make this exact same recipe using your crock pot. Just cook your meat on low for 8 hours or on high for 4 to 5 hours, but use those same soup ingredients and broth, and you'll have nice tender cube steak. In fact, that's how we always used to make it before we got our Instant Pot. I just can't trade my Instant Pot now for my crock pot, considering that I can go from frozen to cooked in just, you know, about half an hour to 40 minutes. So I kind of have fallen in love with that. So now we were all finished with getting our meat ready. We made sides of mashed potatoes to go with our cube steak and gravy, and green beans. And here I'm just showing you that I've got my lid on, and when you have it finished cooking, it is always, that button lights up, it just says keep warm. And that's a great way just to keep everything ready and waiting on everybody. So here it is plated up, and I even put a video here at the end to show you how tender this is. We don't need knives, it's just absolutely fork tender and delicious. One of my family's favorites. Thank y'all for joining me again. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you like it here on YouTube. And don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.